Thanks for coming to our demo theater, Joel Whitney and James Tedrick. So today we'll be covering remotely invoking ArcGIS applications, and this will be talking mainly in the context of deep linking through the URL scheme. We're going to do some slides to kind of cover the high level of that, and then we'll do some quick demos showing the basics of how that works in some of our mobile applications. Quick show of hands, is there anyone actually using any of our mobile apps today? Wow, okay, cool. Is there anyone actually using the URL scheme? Couple, okay. Well, hopefully by the end of this, you'll get a better understanding of some of the ways that you can use the URL scheme to maybe improve some of your workflows. And then you'll also get a sense of kind of how our apps work together using this same sort of technology. And this might give you a hint of how you can maybe integrate some of your own custom applications into our applications as well. So what is a URL scheme? And essentially a URL scheme is just a method for invoking or passing state information between applications. It's really common today in most applications, most mobile applications, and you probably use the URL scheme and don't even realize it, because a lot of times it'll be behind the scenes of like a button or something in the UI. So who thinks they've used a URL scheme before in the context of the mobile environment? And the answer is probably all of you have. One simple example of how this works can be seen when you're looking at like the contacts app. And if you actually go to make a call to someone, what it's doing is passing the telephone number and maybe some other information over to the phone application so you can make your call. So note the URL that I have shown there, and we'll kind of break that down in a little bit. So when we first talk about deep linking with the URL scheme, it sounds like some fancy technology, but just like this meaningless GIF, it's really simple, and it's just a way for you to link to a specific location on maybe a website in the case of a deep web link, or in the case of the mobile application, to a specific state in that application. This same sort of technology exists on pretty much all platforms. And they all have their own way of handling this. The important thing to note here is that Esri has kind of standardized the format and the style of the URLs that we're using. So regardless of your organization's policy, whether you be like an iOS device organization, or maybe all Android, or maybe it's like a bring your own device type situation, you can share these URLs with your field workers, and they should be able to use that same URL without you having to worry about what device they're on. If we actually break down the URL scheme structure, it really comes down to two components. So first, you'll have an application schema, and this is the identifying information that will let the operating system know which application that you're trying to launch. So in the case of a deep web link, which is just a URL to a website, instead of having a HTTPS:// instead you'll have some sort of identifier for that application. You also need to include some app-specific data or parameters, and this is the information that will be passed to the mobile application to provide it the information it needs to give the user their desired state. So what this could look like in this simple example here is I have an application with the identifier my app, and then I'm just passing in some key value pair as a parameter there. I also included a couple examples of some stuff we'll look at in a little bit. One is a URL to Explorer, and one is a URL to Navigator. The Explorer URL just has that ArcGIS-Navigator app scheme, and then it references an item ID to open a specific map. And then the Navigator URL has the ArcGIS-Navigator app scheme, and then it just is going to have a list of stops, so Navigator can generate the route based on the stops. It's important to note that all of our app schemes are pretty similar. They all are prefixed with that ArcGIS dash, and then you can just pretty much replace the remainder of that with the application name. So since this is a Dev Summit, some of you may be wondering how you can add URL scheme support to your own custom application. And it's pretty straightforward. So on iOS, what you have to do is you first just have to specify the application scheme, and you would do this in like your info plist file. And then you need to handle any arguments that are going to be passed along with the URL. And you can do that in the open URL method in your app delegate. For Android, it's pretty similar. You have to declare your app scheme in the app manifest, and then you can use Android's native intent framework to handle any arguments that are going to be passed along with that URL. Okay, so that kind of covers some of the high-level stuff. So let's go ahead and jump into some demos, and we can kind of show how this works with our applications. So first, I'll kind of show you Workforce, and I'll show in the context of the project how you can configure your project to have custom integrations or some default integrations to our mobile applications. Then we'll go and show some of the actual mobile applications in action, such as Explore, Collector, Navigator, and then James will do a quick demo showing Survey 123. So the Workforce component, for those of you who have not used Workforce, it's an application that has a mobile and a web component and allows you to create a project and add dispatchers and workers to that project, which then you can delegate assignments to your field workers. And this allows you to kind of track any assignments that you have open and view your workers in real time. One thing you might want to do when you actually so you can actually create your assignment, assign a worker to that assignment, and one thing you might want them to do is actually do some sort of extra step once they're there doing their assignment, and this could be some integration to another application such as Collector to collect a data point, or Survey 123 to fill out some survey. So this is really easy to do, and you can kind of see in the browser view on the left. When you actually configure your project, you can go over to the Advanced tab and actually enable some of the other applications. So you can just click the little Add button, and then in the instance of Collector and Explorer, you'll have to specify a map that you want it to open. Or in the case of Navigator, you just click Add, and then they can navigate to that assignment using Navigator. And what this essentially does is when the field worker actually opens up the assignment on their device, when they tap on that little action button I have kind of circled there, it'll actually present an action sheet with those specific things they can do. So navigate to assignment, collect that assignment, or explore at assignment in the case of Explorer. So this is pretty good if you're working in our suite of apps. It's really easy to configure these things and kind of just get your project in the way you want it. But what if you want to add your own custom integration? So for instance, now my action sheet has a new action, custom integration, do awesome things. So there's no UI component to actually add this sort of functionality, but it's really easy to do using a tool like AGO Assistant. I'm sure a lot of you guys are familiar with AGO Assistant. Yeah, okay. So, do you want to say anything on that? It's a really powerful tool if you're working with items in ArcGIS Online and you want to kind of have some more transparency there and view some metadata and some information about your items. And in the case of your Workforce project, you can actually open that thing up and modify the JSON structure. So you probably can't read that, can you? No? Okay, great. Well, in the bottom there is a section and essentially an array in that JSON dictionary, and it's for assignment integrations. And what you'll notice is those top three that are in there are the default integrations that I added through the UI component. And I actually went ahead and I clicked the little pencil button when you're in that viewer there, and you can actually go ahead and I added a custom app integration to go do awesome things. And then you can kind of specify the URL template you want to use, which is essentially the URL that's going to be called when they tap on that button in the actual application. You have a lot of access to, you have pretty much access to all of the fields in that assignment. So if you have your own custom assignments with their own fields and there's information in that table, you can actually access those properties. So then if you're calling out to your own custom application and you want to pass that information to that other application, you can do so. Okay, so let's switch gears and talk about some of our mobile applications. But before I show my phone, let me just say that I'm going to show one simple example of how you can share these deep links, these URLs with your field workers. But since it's just a URL, there's really any number of ways that you can share this thing with your field workers, all based on your guys' workflow or situation. So since it's a URL, you could embed it in a hyperlink, send that as an email, maybe even throw it in a custom attribute display for a feature in your web map or mobile map package. You could, in some cases, you can send the raw URL, and depending on the operating system, it'll actually render that URL as a tappable link. You can also integrate it into your own custom app, like I kind of just showed in Workforce, and just kind of hide that URL behind a button in the UI. Another way is you can actually encode that URL into like a QR code. And then using like the camera app on iOS or maybe a third-party app in Android, you can actually go ahead, scan that QR code, and then launch the application. Okay, so here's one really simple workflow that I created. Let me just get out my paper copy here. So this is just a really simple example of how I could kind of integrate Collector, Explorer, and Navigator into one kind of realistic workflow where you might be using all of these things together. James is going to do the survey 1, 2, 3, so that's not completely left out. So say my job is actually going out and doing some parcel inspections. One thing I might want to do before I actually leave the office in the morning. Let's switch it. You might see my face for a second, so I apologize. Okay, so one thing you might want to do when you go to leave the office in the morning is you might want to actually just get a latest version of the mobile map package that your organization is using, and this will have all of the parcel data and maybe some raster data for the area that I'm working in. The mobile map package in Explorer will allow me to view that information in a completely disconnected environment. So to make sure I have the latest mobile map package, I can just scan that QR code, and you see I get this URL to Explorer. It references an item ID, and then also passes in a center and a scale. So if I tap on that, it'll actually open the map since I already had it downloaded on my device, and then center the map to the specified center and scale. If I did not have the map on my device, it would have went and found that item on ArcGIS Online or Portal or whatever, and it would have actually initiated the download of that. I can easily go back to my browse, check for updates if I want, or when the application loads, it will prompt me that there's an update available. The great thing about this mobile map package is now that it's downloaded, I can actually go offline. And I guess I'm kind of cheating because I'm still connected to Wi-Fi, but if I disable that too, I'd be able to do everything you'd expect to do. I can search for features, view all their information, view any media that might be in there, any attachments, and I can really do anything I want, just like if I was connected into a similar web map that had that same data in it. Another thing I might want to do before I leave the office in the morning, since I'll be driving around to all these parcels, I might actually want to load my route for the day. So this is going to be the route that has all the stops I'll be going to throughout the day. And instead of having the field worker type all these addresses out one at a time, which would be extremely frustrating if you had a big list of stops, you can actually just use the URL scheme. And that was just the ArcGIS Navigator application scheme, which is a list of stops. So you have stop equals address and stop equals address, however many you want. And Navigator will launch and generate that route in the same order that they appear in that URL. In some instances, you might want your field workers to visit destinations in like a specific order. So the URL scheme will honor that order that you have in the URL so that you can accomplish this. There's also some cases where you want to optimize the route, but you don't want to go through the work of trying to optimize them yourself. So you can actually just, this bottom URL here is the same URL that I just scanned, except for I added and optimize equals true to the end of it. So if I tap on that, it'll be the same stops, but you'll get a different route. And you might have noticed that my time decreased by, I think it was like 10 minutes or something. You also may have noticed that I'm still in airplane mode, and the great thing about mobile map packages in both Explorer and Navigator is once they're downloaded on the device, you can use them 100% offline. Another thing I might want to do is when I'm actually out in the field, and I'm actually going to be doing some edits to these parcels, I can actually go ahead with the URL scheme and scan this QR code that's referencing a web map that I will be doing my edits in. And so you see you have the ArcGIS collector application scheme, and then just like in the Explorer URL, we're looking at an item ID of a web map, and then also providing a center. Oh, and I'm still in airplane mode, but okay, so the only difference here that's worth knowing is when you use the center in collector, it's actually going to drop a pin, and this allows you to quickly collect a new data entry at that specific location. So if you have a known location where you want to collect some information, you can pass that center along with the collector URL, and they can easily launch the application and then start their data collection. Okay, so with that said, I'm going to pass it over to James, and he'll show Survey 123.
Thanks, Joel. So I'm going to show how we can populate information into a form from another application, in this case Explorer. What? Oh, there we go. In this case Explorer. Here you see a map of, in this case, bike share stations, but my assets. I'm able to browse around. I'm not going to press here because that will send me many, many miles away from my assets. And I'm able to click on one and view their pop-up. There it goes. So the pop-up here has a link for filling out a repair report. So note 17 the Corcoran, so it's right there. I'll fill out the report, and we open up Survey 123, and it opens to the form that you're interested in. Additionally, we have the bike station ID populated from that link, as well as you can see the map location with Corcoran Street. I can go in and then complete my report, submit my photo, or submit my form. And right now the limitation we have is we don't have a callback support, so I have to click at the top there to return back to Explorer. Well, yeah, I guess we can do that as the next and then go through.
Okay, so just to quickly summarize what we just showed you, I showed you the workforce project and how you could configure some default and custom integrations into your project. Showed you Explorer, Collector, and Navigator, and just some basic URL scheme stuff. The slides we'll show next have all the parameters outlined, so there's a lot more stuff you can do with this rather than just like kind of the basic item ID opening map stuff that we showed you today. And then James showed you a quick demo of how you could use Explorer and Survey 123 together. So do you want to explain this portion? I mean, I can cover it.
Yeah, so this is pretty simple. We have, first off, the item ID. That is the form's unique ID that we want to load. We then want to, then we have the fields that we wish to populate. So the field at the first part is a fixed value to say, hey, this is a field. And then we provide the name of the field, and then equals the parameter value you want to provide it. Click on center, and that'll set the map as well as the location for the point question.
This is the URL scheme for Explorer with the new version of 18.10. I showed you the item ID parameter, which is the same thing that James just described, except for you can also reference a mobile map package. I showed you the center, and that can be a latitude, longitude pair. It can be an address. It can actually be a feature, something you have configured for feature search in your map. So you can actually reference like a hydrant or something like that. We have an optional WKID parameter if you would like to specify the WKID other than WGS84. I showed you the scale. You can also add a custom rotation if you want to rotate the map on launch. You can launch Explorer into markup mode if you want, just so that you can launch them into a map and you can start doing sketches immediately. You could specify a bookmark instead of providing a center. So if you have some bookmark defined in your web map or your mobile map package, you can just provide that name and it will launch to that viewpoint. You can also provide a search. So if it pretty much just gives you the same experience as if you were searching in the map, except for it kind of bypasses all the manual process of doing that. So you can provide a hydrant ID of something in your map and it will search for that and then display it in the pop-up for you immediately on launch. Navigator, I showed you the stop parameter. You can also provide a stop name if you want to give those things a more meaningful name. So in some cases you might just be using a coordinate pair for your stops. So you can give it a little bit more context so the field worker knows where they're going. You can provide the optional start. So if you don't provide the start, it will just use your current location to generate the route. But if you know they're going to be starting at a specific location, you can provide that. And it will generate that route accordingly. You can provide a callback, and what this will do is as soon as the route navigation has completed, it'll actually call back to the whatever application you specify here. So in the case of Workforce, if you could have saw that JSON that I tried to show you, the URL for Navigator integration there has a Workforce callback in it. So if you want to navigate to an assignment from Workforce, you'll do your route in Navigator, and then immediately when it finishes, it'll bump you back to Workforce. You can also specify travel mode. So what the default behavior is Navigator will use whatever travel mode you have selected, or the default travel mode of the mobile map package if you haven't changed that. But you can also specify a specific travel mode if you have your own custom travel mode you want to use, for instance. Collector, I showed you the item ID in the center parameter, but if you want, you can also provide a feature source URL as well as a JSON dictionary of the feature attributes, and this will allow you to kind of pre-populate some of the information if you already know that. So, in conclusion, URL scheme is a pretty powerful technology. It's really simple, but it allows all of our apps to work together. So each app can kind of perform a specific job. And that also allows you guys as developers to have your own custom application, and you can easily integrate with our applications as well. So here's some quick resources. We have a couple good Navigator case studies out there. They're pretty high level, but they talk about how these organizations have used the URL scheme to save a lot of money and really improve their workflows. We have these GitHub repositories that have a lot of detailed information and examples for each of the applications. You can also come see James or I at the island, and we can show you pretty much anything you want to see if you have any specific needs. Anything else you want to add there?
No, I think with that, we are done. If we'll take your questions. We may have a couple minutes. I'm actually seeing if there's another, nope, there isn't another demo theater, so we don't have to clear out immediately. Sam. Yeah.
On the survey 123, you have multiple values into the survey.
So the question is, with the survey 123 scheme, the field had the field parameter. Does that take one field? Is one field a restriction, or is there multiple fields? You can have multiple fields. They need to be separated by the ampersand, just as they're each a separate, the field colon and then the field name, the value, and then ampersand the next field. Right? It's not a unified parameters set there.
Can you go back to the collector parameters really quick? So, sorry, next slide.
Yeah, I think I went too far.
Yeah, that's fine. So
This is a map, so the item ID, you still need to provide the item ID to that map. So it's more of like the feature source URL of the layer that you're editing within that map. Yeah.
But it would still be under the same security restrictions
Right.
as collector, so they would need to have been previously signed in for the best experience.
Yeah.
With Survey123, if you're accessing a form you don't have and you're not signed in, the first thing we do is say, hey, we can't get it, please sign in.
Yep. Yep.
A maximum size on the URL scheme. It's somewhere up in the neighborhood of, I think, 10K of characters.
Yeah, I didn't even know there was a limit. It's pretty.
Yeah, it's pretty big.
Yeah. The only limitation I have found in like actual use cases for a lot of people that are using the QR codes is obviously the more information you try and pack into that QR code, it becomes unreadable pretty quick.
In Navigator there, if you're in airplane mode, if you're in airplane mode, can you still do routing? Like if you're using the network service?
Yeah, so the question is, if you're in airplane mode in Navigator, can you still route? And the answer is yes. That's all built into the routing network that's in the mobile map package. So you can do that completely offline. So their mobile map package will need to have a locator and a transportation network. So you could do searching for addresses, point searches, and then you could route to those things, and it'll be able to solve those.
Sure. Yeah. So the Survey123 link, unlike the other, actually that needs to get updated slightly.
Oh, okay.
It's in the. I can actually. So it's in our official documentation with Survey123, as opposed to the other products which have it in as a GitHub repository. If you go to the Survey123 documentation, click Reference, it's under the Integrate with Other Apps category. Additionally, we have a GeoNet blog post that covers this extensively. You basically just look at our blog posts, and then easiest way to get it is to search for URL and understanding Survey123's custom URL scheme.
Yep. We'll be at the island the rest of the day, so we can show you anything else you want to see. So feel free to come by. Great. Thank you.
Thank you.